Welcome back to another session on my Rumination channel. That's my Rumination Network channel. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope that you'd like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And let me just say that tomorrow we have a live, and we are going to be looking at the fact of the drug boats, the strikes on the drug boats, and people are now having lots of drama in Washington about whether Hegseth and Trump should be called war criminals. But we are going to be looking at how Obama and Bush set the stage for Hegseth and Trump. Very important that we understand this history to understand that this is an action, this is a policy of the U.S. military-industrial complex, and that this is where U.S. is moving towards in terms of, striking people without due process. And when, Barack Obama, not Barack Obama, but Bush came up with the unlawful combatant, that was also not a terminology in international law when he was talking about unlawful combatants or enemy combatants. Okay, people were arguing that that was not illegal expression. Now, the same thing Trump is coming up with, the narco-terrorist, that is also not a legal expression, not to be found in domestic U.S. laws or in international law. Very important that we understand these sort of, realities. Now, today we're going to be looking at the title, PM Andrew Holness, as the Prime Minister of Jamaica, breaks silence on the war on Venezuela at G20, joins Kamla's position on drug trafficking. So we're going to be looking at his statements. But before we look at Andrew Holness's silence, breaking up his silence on the drug war in the Caribbean, let's look at the fact that there has also been another strike on a boat by the U.S. The presidency, by the U.S. President and his Secretary of War, his Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. And the Hill is reporting military struck drug boat in Caribbean 4 times in September. Second attack, says U.S. official. Now, there was also the U.S. military struck an alleged drug boat in the Caribbean at the center of a controversy involving Secretary of Defense Hegseth 4 times during a September 2nd attack, according to a U.S. official who spoke to The Hill Wednesday morning on condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive operations. Now, I think that there was another drug boat strike in the Caribbean. When I say drug boat, I mean another strike recently that Hegseth says US just sung another, right, yeah, the Time magazine here, because I know I read it and I was wondering if I read the wrong thing. The Time magazine is reporting that Hegseth says US just sunk another narco boat amid double tap strike controversy. So Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth on Thursday evening, that's last Thursday, confirmed that the U.S. had launched another boat strike, this time in the Eastern Pacific. Because I know I'd read this and I was wondering, why are they going back to September 2nd? The announcement came hours after Hegseth faced immense scrutiny as Admiral Frank Mitch Bradley, the Navy SEAL officer who now leads the U.S. Special Operations Command, briefed members of Congress at Capitol Hill about the controversial double tap strike that took place on an alleged drug boat in the Caribbean on September 2nd. And tomorrow we're going to be explaining what we mean by the double tap strike, which was actually formed under President Barack Hussein Obama. The incident is considered by some to be a potential war crime, as a follow-up strike on a boat ordered by Bradley killed survivors of the first attack. So this is coming from the Times magazine online. So it's interesting that while they are kicking up a storm in Congress and on Capitol Hill, whether or not the defense secretary, that is Pete Hegseth, will be indicted or will be tried, will be fired, he's striking another boat. He struck another boat on Thursday. Since launching the initial strike in the Caribbean Sea in September, the Trump administration has argued that the U.S. military action is necessary to curb the flow of narcotics into the United States. While the administration has yet to release any public evidence showing that the boats being targeted are carrying drugs, lawmakers who attended Thursday's briefing said officials had confirmed drugs were found aboard the vessels. So Hegseth has come under fire in recent days, with bipartisan calls for an investigation after the Washington Post reported that he had given a kill everybody directive that resulted in a second strike being extended upon a vessel to which survivors from the initial strike were still clinging on. Now, they're kicking up a storm, as I'm suggesting, about the fact that he killed two survivors. But why did he kill any in the first place when they had not gone through the process of investigation, when their due process had been denied? It's the same murder. So whether or not the two surviving ones, the fact that the ones who did not survive were also summarily executed. And that is what we should be saying too. And we should be saying to put a stop on it. But while they're arguing, in the midst of the drama in Congress and also on Capitol Hill and in the legal councils, Hegseth and Trump continue to strike boats, speedboats in the Caribbean. And that to me is alarming. It suggests to me that what you're seeing is just drama, it's just theater, and that they're not seeking corrective measures or to put a halt on the serious violation of international law and also domestic law. Because I can't see any law except for the Patriot Act, which seems to have supplanted the US Constitution. It seems to me that the Patriot Act of 2002, I think it was 2002 or 2001, that was passed in Congress and has on many occasions been updated. Okay? Now, the fact of the matter is, if they're carrying on like this and pretending, the media included, as if they want to indict Peter Hegseth, and whether or not he's indicted, even if he's fired, it will not stop it. What needs to be stopped is the fact that we need to say no to the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act needs to be stripped of every paper that it has been written on. If that law is not stripped, then I think that these illegal actions and defiance of international law will continue. Because if it's not Trump today, it's going to be somebody else tomorrow. And we can see what is happening in the Gaza, in Palestine. And yet still, we are not making the connections that the same thing is happening to us. The same thing is happening here in the Caribbean waters, okay? On the high seas in the Caribbean and the Pacific Ocean. Okay? So we have to make the connection. So I think 4 people were unalived on the recent striking of a boat that happened last Thursday. Okay? So whilst they're carrying on and they're shouting and they're screaming about the defiance and also the illegality of Hegseth's actions, and the fact that he is calling for boats to be struck without due process, that he also daringly went and struck another boat. Okay? So that's to suggest to us that this is nothing serious that they're doing. That the New York Times and the Washington Post, Congress, the Times magazine from which I'm reading, all of them are not interested in stopping it. Because they could have offered or put more pressure on Trump. But that is why we're having the live tomorrow, to show you that this precedence has already been set by George W. Bush and Barack Hussein Obama. In fact, Barack Obama was branded as the drone also in chief. He's not only the deporter in chief, but he's also the drone man in chief, who unalived many people with drones, including in Jamaica. And we have to revisit that history that took place in Jamaica during the Christopher Dudus Coke saga. We must revisit that history because that history happened within the Caribbean, happened here. And many of us, oh, that was Jamaica, that happened there. And Dulles had to be sent away because he was a drug kingpin. And the same thing we can argue, oh, that's in Venezuela, and Nicolas Maduro has to go because he's an authoritarian, he's an autocrat, and he's a drug runner. Says who? And who controlled the likes of Christopher Dudus Coke? Right? Who controlled him? And these are the questions that we've got to ask. Who is the creator of this Cartel de los Soles? Who created it? Was it the CIA or was it Nicolas Maduro? These are the research, these are the questions that we need to pose as we conduct our own research, our own investigation. Very important that we understand that. Now let's segue into Andrew Holness, the Prime Minister of Jamaica, and the fact that he is now fully on board, well, officially with Kamla Persad-Bissessar's stance on the war on drugs. So make no bones about it. CARICOM might just say, oh, we want a zone of peace, but I think that secretly they are supporting Kamla Persad-Bissessar. But they have to pretend, just like the US media is doing, as if they're against Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump, and at the same time, the large majority, I won't say everybody, including CARICOM, the large majority are on Donald Trump's and Pete Hegseth's side. And that is why they're allowed to do what they're doing without any major pushback. People are just throwing words here and there, the Democrats included, weak pronouncements, making weak pronouncements that are not able to have Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth rethink their position. Okay? Now, the fact is that Prime Minister Andrew Holness of Jamaica was invited to another G20. Can you imagine? We know that G20 is not for the likes of the Caribbean countries, these islands in the Caribbean Sea. And this is his second invitation. I think he was invited 3 weeks ago. He attended that meeting 3 weeks ago. So Andrew Holness seems to be, rubbing shoulders with some very top officials. And that's why sometimes he displays the level of arrogance that he displays in the Jamaican parliament. But, it was interesting, his conversation that he had, which I found a little clipping online on TikTok, and I'm going to share that with you right now, on his pronouncements on the war on Venezuela, on Trump's war on Venezuela, and the spilling over of that war into the Caribbean region, Latin American Caribbean region. And his pronouncements were rather ambivalent, if you will, right? At one point, he's suggesting that he wants the Caribbean to be maintained as a zone of peace, yet still we have to deal with transnational criminality, which is true. We must clean up, or if we can, as much as is possible, clean up transnational, criminality and all its elements and all its cells within the region. However, we can't pretend as if the ones who are suggesting that we clean it up or clean up all of that criminality, that a lot of them are not guilty. A lot of them are guilty. They are guilty as charged, but yet still they are the ones at the helm who are acting hypocritically if they can clean up the mess. It's almost like a pastor preaching to you a sermon, and he's talking about, sexual promiscuity. At the same time, he or she is involved in that sort of sexual perversion, right? And this is what we're seeing our prime ministers and our leaders, or political leaders, or most of them, engaged in. Preaching to us, telling us that we are the criminals and they are the saints. They are the moral guards of the political landscape. And if they get rid of us, And some of the politicians who disagree with them, because not their war is also on on Nicolas Maduro, who is a political leader, but because he's not acceding to Washington's wishes and demands, he is being branded as a criminal. Okay, and that is exactly what they're doing. He has not acceded. He has not complied with Washington's request. And then they do not want his influence to spread across the region. Okay, so they have to get rid of him, just like they have to also call an end to the government of Cuba and also of Nicaragua. Hence the Maduro situation that is there. They have to deal with Maduro. Because if they don't, then Maduro is going to have, and his country will have tremendous influence on other governments within the region if he continues to defy US wishes and demands. Okay, now let's look at what Andrew Holness said in when he was asked a question about what are his thoughts on what Trump is doing, the war on drugs within the Caribbean region. Let us look at what the Prime Minister of Jamaica, the most honorable Dr. Andrew Holness, suggested. Okay, so let me see if I can turn up the screen, not the screen, but the volume.
Not here, but we have seen increased tensions in your region between the US and Venezuela, very close to Jamaica. How do you assess the situation at this point? What are some of the risks that you see?
We always maintain that the Caribbean is a zone of peace, and we want to ensure that it's a zone of peace. Any action that challenges that or changes that would have or could have devastating impact on tourism, which is a major foreign exchange earner for most countries in the Caribbean.
You see, the first thing that he's thinking about is tourism. He's not thinking about the lives of the citizens in the Caribbean region, whether they be in Jamaica or in Trinidad and Tobago or wherever they are, that is going to disrupt their lives. He's thinking about the lives of tourists, just like after the post-Melissa hurricane and the relief and recovery there in Jamaica. All they're concerned about, for the most part, well, when are we going to get tourism up and running? And they're going to say, well, yes, because tourism is the premier foreign currency earner, and giving jobs to Jamaicans, according to them. But how true is that? And does the money remain there, or is the money sent off to tax havens? And how much money is given to our people? In fact, there was a situation recently in which the Grand Príncipe Bahia, the Príncipe Bahia Hotel in, I think, somewhere in Runaway Bay in Jamaica, was closed. And the workers were actually striking and were demanding their money and saying, that this was just abruptly done and that they were not given any benefits while they were working. They were just contract workers. No health benefit, no retirement benefit, no nothing. Incident, accident, whatever happens to them at the job, they have no protection. And their salaries, of course, their wages are extremely low. Extremely low. Yet still, they closed down the hotel during the storm, many of them, so they had to get up and they had to go to work early in the morning. And this hotel has just been closed down, no questions asked, and there's nobody to come to their rescue. So tourism in Jamaica is effectively slavery. And I've done videos on that it is really the reiteration, the reiteration, the resurfacing, the rehashing, the replay of chattel slavery. That is what it is. Okay? But that is what they want to revive. Okay? They're thinking about that. They're not thinking about the livelihood of citizens.
Said that, however, there must be consideration for countries in the region for rising crime, rising transshipment, and drugs. So there is need to tackle this business of drugs, transshipment, and rising crime linked to these operations in the region. So whatever is being done should be done with consideration for the economy of the region, safety, and respect for the sovereignty of the people. But Jamaica does support actions.
Right. So Jamaica supports the action. That's what it is. Jamaica supports the action of what Trump is doing. Right? He was saying it in a very nice way because he doesn't want to, be involved in the consequences that might, accrue to his government, in which he perhaps will be asked to leave to. So he has to be very careful with how he constructs his words, what he says. But he went further on to say that when he was asked, if he is in dialogue with the Trump administration, he said he's always involved in some form of dialogue with the Trump administration. So Andrew Holness is involved and is on board, not involved, but he is on board with what is happening in the Caribbean, just like Kamla Persad-Bissessar. He is on board with what the US is doing. And CARICOM, by extension, is on board. Okay? So we can say all we want to say in terms that we're sovereign, right? And we're a zone of peace. But they know that what they have been doing, they have been creating wars, chaos, because out of chaos, they want to create a new world order. Okay? A new world order. And the fact that Andrew Holness has been invited a second time to a G20 meeting, was he before invited to a G7? I think it's the second time to a G20. Okay? But the fact that he has been invited twice to one of these meetings that Jamaica is not affiliated with, okay, it suggests that he holds a high place within that New World Order circuit of people. And he has claimed that the United Nations Secretary General, that is Gutierrez, okay, that is his friend, his personal friend, and is a friend of Jamaica. I don't think he's a friend of Jamaica, but certainly he is Andrew Holness's friend. Okay? And this is where we are going as a region, that our politicians are hypocritical, as you can imagine. They are hypocritical. And make no bones about it, many of them are on board with what Trump is doing, just like the Democratic Party is on board with what Trump is doing, because they did it too. Obama. And we are going to learn tomorrow in our live was one of the primary presidents, more recent presidents, most recent president, I should say, who actually, along with his drone strikes laws that unalived many people around the world. Okay? So we need to remind ourselves of history and understand that this is more than just personality. This is a systemic problem. This is a systemic problem. And how are we going to change a system that is rotten to the core? How are we going to do it? That is the question. And many of us have not yet sought to answer that question. It's too complex to answer. So we would rather give Kamla and Andrew Holness and support what they're doing and say, yes, they have to clean up, but clean up what? And what if they are a part of the problem? That is what we have to ask. What if Trump is a part of the problem? What if Hegseth is a part of the problem? What if Obama was a part of the problem and perhaps continues to be a part of the problem? Okay? And that's what we have to ask. Can we really clean up drug trafficking? And who are we cleaning up, or what are we cleaning up? That's the question. And I don't know if any man is going to be able, because of our hypocritical nature, is going to be able to clean it up. Only God. Only God. And a righteous leader will be able to clean up. And as the Bible suggests, which one of us is without sin? No, not one. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you like, share, and subscribe. Like the videos, that the videos can be shared with as many people on the platform. And remember, now our live tomorrow starts at 4 p.m. sharp. Be there and be on time so we can talk about the complicity of both the Democrats and the Republicans' U.S. presidents, including Bush and Barack Obama, with this war on drugs, and that they are the ones who set the stage, who laid the foundation for what Trump is actually doing, and doing heartily and with great pride. See you tomorrow, and make sure you watch this video and share it with as many people so that we can get as many views and our channel can grow tremendous. Okay, we can see tremendous growth by the end of the year. Thank you so much for your support. See you. Hasta entonces.